Taking this motion will only worsen the poor people's lives, the vulnerable actors that we must be protecting in this debate, and also is simply a way for the government to run away from their responsibility and push it onto the private sectors who already are fulfilling enough of a responsibility. So I'm going to be going through my speech with mainly three clash points. First of all, does this motion mitigate or minimize the wealth gap and the disparities? So what I'm going to do first of all is explain to you exactly who these property developers are and what type of thing is actually going to happen in the after plan. So who are these property developers? They're basically profit incentivized, right? Because they're private sector. So what they will do is even if you mandate them to build these low cost housing, it's not like they're going to build like a bunch of houses within like Beverly Hills for those poor people. They're going to only build a few and hide it away because they don't want to ruin the looks of the neighborhood. They want to make it stay like it looks nice, and so they're not going to actually make very many. Because they also, and furthermore, they don't want to spend so much money on a house that isn't as profitable as like those wealthy mansions and those pensions. Furthermore, secondly, who are the they're going to build the houses that the middle class people can buy. The definition of low cost housing is not very clear, so it isn't going to be the ones that truly poor people can buy. It is going to be the people who are like somewhat middle class, who can't afford Beverly Hills but can afford more than ghettos. Those are the people who are going to be living in these houses, and only a few of them. So now that I've cleared that up, I'm going to be moving on into explaining more about whether this helps solve the problem of wealth disparity. Now, in the aspect of infrastructure, education, and security, OO has already brought up a pretty good point in talking about how these poor people can't afford to buy their daily lives, the things they need for their daily lives, like grocery stores and so on. But rather, I'm going to compare this directly by saying one thing. Even if everything on the other side says about how there's infrastructure, these people can have access to infrastructure and education, even if all of those things stand, those only help the few people that get to live in those houses in these rich neighborhoods. Only those few countable people. But rather what this does is this creates this whole group mindset of these rich people to dislike the poor. Because why? As the other side has said, they're basically using the rich people's taxes that afford these police to protect themselves. So they're basically stealing off the rich people's wealth. So why would the rich people like them? Secondly, it makes the town look bad to have like a shaggy house in the middle of like mansions and pools and all that stuff. So overall, the rich people don't like these poor people, and it's just a group society mindset, a lot bigger of an impact to worsen discrimination rather than say giving a few middle class people like better infrastructure. So overall, when you compare it, clearly it is a lot worse for societal discrimination to take this motion. Now, furthermore, I'm going to be explaining into more depth about education and security, something that CG has brought up. CG and OG as well has talked about how education can help you get out of the poverty cycle. However, first of all, we say to this, as my previous speaker has already explained, these rich people go to private schools. A majority of the rich people go to private schools, especially from like middle school. Even in Japan, most of the people who aren't even so rich go to private schools. So these public schools, how it's going to help, they haven't really said. So definitely there is no mingling because they go to completely different schools. Furthermore, even if these poor people go to the same schools as these rich people, what will happen is they're going to be discriminated against because children are dumb. All they see is, oh my god, that poor kid is not wearing as nice clothes. They don't have the newest smartphone. And they ridicule those poor people. And these poor people are going to constantly feel bullied, feel pressured. And that leads them to, for example, not coming to school, which is going to make them not be able to focus on their education, so they can't get out of this poverty cycle, but rather only creates this worse divide of mindset to hit the polarization of the rich and the poor, and it only worsens that from a young age. Now, secondly, the point they brought up about security and about these policemen. First of all, the people who are going to be living in these houses aren't those in the ghetto, so they don't originally come from those super, super slum places, so it's not that different. Furthermore, we say that this motion, rather what we should be doing is, for example, relocating the police or increasing the police force and move it to the poorer neighborhoods so that they are protected. That is something that the government should be doing. That is the government responsibility. And while the government should be doing that, this motion is simply pushing the government's burden onto these private sectors. Now, secondly, let me talk about the incentives of the mindset of the rich and the poor. What OG has come up here to talk about is how these poor people will be incentivized to work hard because you see these rich people. First of all, that's very idealistic. It's not going to happen. What OO has talked about is how seeing there are OO has also said to us that they're seeing these rich people, they already see it on social media, so it's no difference. However, we say to this, it is very different. On social media, all you see is their posts. But once you go to these rich neighborhoods, you go to the supermarket, you see the price of a loaf of bread and you realize, wow, it's not just their clothes, it's not just their car, they really, really are different. And it's clearly going to be a worse impact on them to see how different it is exactly in number of money. Furthermore, the CG has brought up a point about the mingling of these two people. However, first of all, we say that interaction is already decreasing amongst your neighbors day by day, especially in Tokyo, for example. The problem of like people dying alone and only noticing because of the smell is increasing, so there's not a lot of interaction. Anyways, and we have already said to you, my previous speaker has already proven to you why they live completely separate lives and they don't interact. So therefore, this doesn't happen. Now, secondly, clash point. What will the local governments do? We say that the local governments will, as my previous speaker has directly brought up, these local governments are going to make policies that only favor the rich people, and it doesn't solve the problem. Furthermore, we say that this is a problem because they're ignoring. No, thank you for your report. They're ignoring the truly poor people because this motion only helps, as I pointed out, the middle class people. And we say that the government is going to use this as an excuse to run away from actually solving the poor people, because that costs a lot of money and the government doesn't want to do it. Last clash point. Who is going to take responsibility for these economic disparities? So as my previous speaker has already pointed out, this opening half has talked about who is responsible, but that is not the point. We say that, okay, to some extent there may be a responsibility on these private sectors, these property developers, but we say, as my previous speaker has directly pointed out, a clash in saying that the degree of responsibility, they're already fulfilling their responsibility through employment, stability of the area, and all that stuff. It is completely unjust for the government to push their responsibility completely onto these private sectors who are already doing enough just so they can run away. So in conclusion, what am I trying to say? This motion only worsens the lives of these vulnerable poor people that the government must be protecting, and it is simply a way for the government to run away. And because my previous speaker and I have clearly proven that, we are very, very proud to propose. Thank you.